For most people, I think this is how these nutrition challenges go. You find yourself white-knuckling yourself through these challenges. You find yourself fantasizing about the food that you're going to eat once the challenge ends, watching food porn all day, and just constantly having your next meal or just food on your mind, depending on which diet you're doing. And you might make it through the challenge, but shortly after the challenge ends, you find yourself binge eating the foods that you were fantasizing about and undoing the progress that you made during the challenge, or you are unable to finish the challenge fully and you're riddled with guilt and shame and question why it is that you don't have the willpower or discipline that your peers have. If that's the case, then this video is for you. We're gonna dive into what is actually going on physiologically, psychologically, and help it make more sense. So let's dive into it. I'm going to be referencing 2 scientific publications, both of which will be listed below. The first article I'm referencing is going to be covering eating motives and the controversy around dieting. This article discusses 2 hunger systems that occur within us. The first one that we're going to talk about is the homeostatic hunger system. This is activated by energy deprivation and specifically chronic energy deprivation. So this is typically seen in people who maybe struggle with anorexia or elite athletes who are constantly underfeeding themselves. This is actually not a typical thing that we see in our modern day society, since we have an abundance of food around us, and it's fairly rare that people are severely underfed for a long period of time. This is also called physiological hunger. The next hunger system is called the hedonic hunger system, and this is triggered by being around and having access to palatable foods. If you think about our ancestors back in the day, our primal ancestors, they would be fine eating a piece of meat without any salt or any seasonings and leaves and plants off of trees and shrubs. These things they would ingest and they would be satisfied by it. But anybody watching this video probably, if you were to think about that meal, that would probably not be very appetizing or appealing for you, right? If we could visualize palatability as a range, the range that our primal ancestors were working with is a lot smaller than the range that we have today, because we have such accessibility to different foods and ingredients, and of course technology making our food taste absolutely delicious and hijacking our brains essentially. It is quite easy to find very palatable foods that are also hyper-processed. What this article states is that hedonic hunger, or psychological hunger, is experienced in the body in the same way as homeostatic hunger. So even if a person isn't actually in an energy deficit, they are perceiving as if they are, and they are driven to eat more by this hedonic hunger process. The prevalence of restrained eating and dieting in the past 30 years, according to this article, is caused by passive overeating, which there are a million distractions around us all the time. It's very easy to take our consciousness away from the act of mindful eating, and hyperphagia that is triggered by being around hyperpalatable and hyperprocessed foods all the time. It's no secret at this point that the weight that people lose when going on a diet is gained back shortly thereafter. And this article wants to make the distinction that it's not because the homeostatic hunger process is kicked into gear and the body then goes into starvation mode and starts driving this person to eat more. It's actually caused by the hedonic hunger process. They are experiencing a psychological deprivation and are making up or compensating for not having had those foods in the same amount that they had previously. Now, if you're at this point in the video and you're like, great, I know what the solution is. I'm just going to tell myself that I'm not actually energy deprived. It's just psychological hunger, therefore I'm good, we're safe, not a big deal. That's actually not the solution. It's not as simple as that. The reason why I wanted to highlight this in this article is to basically reassure you guys that if you are feeling hungry, even though you know you're not energy deprived, that psychological hunger is just as real and just as powerful as physiological hunger. And so there is a way to approach this where it sets us up for success, but trying to convince yourself that it's not actually real isn't going to do the trick. So just continue watching and we'll have the solution for you at the end. This next study that I'm referencing is going to be exploring the relationship between dopamine and binge eating. And in this study, they used rats, and they administered to these rats fat emulsions, sucrose solutions, or a combination of the two over a period of 6 to 8 weeks. And they gave these rats the meals or these substances at intervals that might replicate a person who is restricting calories over a period of time. Derived from these rodent animal models, it has been demonstrated that both irregular eating patterns and dietary factors, specifically having access to fat, sugar, or a combination of the two, led to an effect in dopamine signaling as well as binge eating behaviors. Additionally, this study also states that chronic calorie restriction can actually have the same effect as reinforcing the potency of drugs of abuse. Essentially, if you can imagine a drug addict, when their drug is taken away from them all at once, that drug is even more seductive to them. The same thing happens with food. When we allow ourselves to eat these hyperpalatable foods and then out of nowhere we just whisk them away, our brains are looking for those foods. Those foods are becoming even more appealing to us, even more seductive to us. This is one of the downsides to labeling foods as good foods or bad foods, is that those bad foods actually take up a part of our consciousness and they become more alluring to us. Both repeated access to palatable food and calorie restriction and irregular eating patterns led to robust feeding responses, aka binge eating, and anticipatory behaviors. This article uncovered that eating food that is more palatable and then taking them away could result in a perceived deprivation that will likely result in compensatory eating behaviors, aka eating an excess amount of that food once the person has access to that food again. At this point in the video, you might be feeling a little bit confused. Okay, so hyperpalatable foods cause me to overeat, but also restricting calories also causes me to overeat. So what's the solution here? Well, the solution is slow and steady wins the race. And I know that's not the quick fix solution that most people want to hear, but the reality is that our bodies require our compassion and our patience. We need to set our bodies up for success. It doesn't make sense to go from 0 to 100. We need to slowly integrate foods that we find nourishing and delicious and are healthy and feel good in our bodies, while slowly weaning off those foods that we might believe are contributing to our overeating habits. Our bodies are not something to beat into submission. They need time, they need patience. It is more of an art than a science. Tuning into your body's intuition and listening to feedback from your body is definitely a skill that needs to be fine-tuned and acquired. It can be tricky, but it absolutely can be done. If you need extra help, there are tons of resources online, but also I am a coach and I would love to help you out on your journey. But ultimately, that is the solution, is to be slow and steady and sustainable, and you and your body will be happy and healthy. Thank you for watching this video. I hope you found it helpful, and if you did, please keep an eye out for the next video in this series. It's going to be about exercise and how exercise affects our appetite. And if you are looking into diving into more of that internal work, understanding how your internal world is affecting your behavior and relationship with food, then please keep an eye out for my upcoming series. The video is going to be about perfectionists and food. Once again, thank you so much. I hope this was helpful. Please feel free to reach out with any questions and have a great day.